Hi everyone, this is NUSensei. A while ago I made a video talking about the topic of how to portray someone who is unskilled or untrained in archery. And the purpose was to explore how a creator, someone who is making a story or a film, might portray archery. Now today we'll go to the other end of the spectrum, and that is, how do you make your archer character look really good? Now, the obvious thing which people might jump to is Lars Anderson. And I think that's a very good point. If you're going to show someone who is fully mastered archery in all its skills, Lars Anderson is a very good reference. But not everything he does has a practical purpose. And you also have to distinguish between exhibition skills and practical skills. The character or the scenario that you create might not warrant something as flashy as Lars Anderson. So you may have to think about other ways to make your archer character appear more skillful. On a side note, the same can be said for things like martial arts movies. You probably are very familiar with Jackie Chan or Jet Li, but their skills and techniques are mostly from a performance background. So for example, Jet Li has a background in wushu, which is mostly exhibition performance based, not a combat sport or combat art. So while it might look good on camera because of choreography and other technical reasons, it may not work, and that's what we want to perhaps differentiate in this video. In my mind, there are two general subsets of skill in archery. There's vertical skill and there's lateral skill. Vertical skill describes the primary purpose of archery, and that is to hit the target. So in that sense, you will need to think of ways to enhance how the character is able to achieve the goal of accuracy. After all, if they can't hit the target, then they're not a very good archer, full stop. So what can we do to make the archer look really good in this case? One way is to increase the distance of their target. Now, people sometimes underestimate what the average archer can do. And you might think, oh yes, this person can hit a target at 30 meters very accurately. I can do that with nearly every bow, from modern Olympic recurve to Asiatic horsebow. So that's actually not that skillful, and I'm not exactly a very good archer. I'm fairly average. So a 30-meter target is pretty baseline. Historically, archers who engage in combat might be precise up to 50 meters. And if you can hit a mark like an apple at 50 meters, then that's probably a sign of exceptional skill. If you want to extend to like superhuman feats, the typical combat distance for volley fire or for area shooting might be, say, 150, maybe 200 meters, in which case you're no longer aiming for a particular spot, but you're aiming for a general area. So if you have a character who is able to hit a point target from 50 to 100 meters, then this person is either a very skilled person or a godlike being. Next is target size, and again, people often underestimate what the average archer can do. A typical archer, again, the average person like me, could hit a typical 1.2 meter target face at 70 meters probably 100% of the time. So size isn't really an indicator of skill. So if you want to make an archer look even better, you might want to shrink the target size. Now, the Olympic archer using modern equipment can hit a DVD-sized gold spot probably 93% of the time for the top archers. So if you want to make your character look really good, you need to kind of match that baseline with the equipment and skill in your setting. So if you're shooting a traditional bow and you're hitting a target at 70 meters with that accuracy, that is truly exceptional. Likewise, if you are shooting a closer distance, you might want to shrink the target to even smaller sizes. And this can be applicable to things like weak spots in armor, or shoot an eyeball, or some other really small, skillful target, which you might put your character in. Thirdly, there's the idea of moving targets. Most archers don't practice against moving targets because it's not practical, and most people shoot at static targets. Honestly, a moving target actually isn't that skillful. Most targets can be shot at with timing rather than an individual skill shot. But to make this more challenging and therefore exhibit more skill, make the target move erratically. If you're moving in a straight line or running like in a straight line, then that's going to be an easy shot. But if someone's moving or dodging very erratically, then that's very hard to predict. So to hit that target, the archer will have to demonstrate exceptionally fast thinking and foresight to make this work. And that's one way to make it look really skillful. Bonus points if the archer is also moving, either running or jumping or riding on horseback. Now, the second subset of skill is lateral skills. And when I talk about lateral skills, I refer to side skills or peripheral skills. Skills which don't directly impact the archer's accuracy or precision, but other things the archer can do to make themselves more well-rounded. And the reason why it's important to factor in these other skills would be that, well, if you're creating a character who is a good archer, then obviously they'll hit every shot they take. And that might be written in print or it might be done in CGI. I mean, you won't see Legolas or Hawkeye really miss a shot. So it can get pretty dull if you have the perfect archer. So you might want to embellish other things to make their character look better. There are a couple of easy ways to do this. One is, of course, speed shooting. The faster they shoot, the cooler it looks. I mean, hitting one orc, that's cool, but hitting 5 orcs in 2 seconds, even better. So speed shooting, obviously it's a skill which can be done. It requires a lot of dexterity, and therefore one way to make your archer character look really good. Related to that is loading technique. Often people are drawn by unconventional styles. For example, in movies, you might see a character shoot really accurately from the hip, or they might load the gun in a certain way, which makes them look different and therefore look cooler on screen. And Archer has similar tropes. In real life, archers might carry arrows in their bow hand and load quickly from the bow hand, or they might load arrows from the string hand and load super quickly here. And again, Lars Anderson demonstrates a lot of these skills, and speed shooting with a unconventional loading technique is another way to make your archer character stand out. Another fairly easy way to show skill is through ambidexterity. Very few archers can shoot confidently with both hands. Ancient archers perhaps might have trained this, but modern archers tend to stick with one dominant hand. So having your character shoot confidently with both sides is also a good skill. This is relevant perhaps in a modern context. For example, with modern infantry, most soldiers will learn to shoot with one side, but they might have to shoot with the other side if they're fighting in, say, urban environments. So you could put the archer at a similar disadvantage and make them use the alternate shooting stance. And on that note, shooting from difficult positions. Anyone can shoot standing up and shooting at a level target. Having to shoot while crouched, kneeling, ducking, under cover, shooting at high angles or low angles. Both of these things, all of these things, are ways to make the archer stress a bit more over making the perfect shot. That's why competitions in modern times like 3D archery or field archery can be more challenging than normal target archery, because you have different terrain and you have different physical environmental challenges. So again, that's one way to make your archer more skillful all round. You can include acrobatics. Archers often have the stereotype of being dexterous and agile, like the elvish characters. So having the character being able to perform acrobatics, like jumps or somersaults, or things like parkour, are good ways to make the archer more viable in different scenarios, such as being able to reach more difficult positions. There's also the stereotype of the stealth archer, the hidden, silent but deadly character. This is more the Skyrim sort of thing, which works just as well. And yeah, having the character being able to remain unseen, undetected, and take out enemies with impunity is another way to show an exceptional archer. And then there's other combat skills. Often archers can't use their bows, so they'll have to fall back on other options. In real life, this was plausible. Archers were soldiers first, which meant that they had to be able to use swords or spears as long as a specialized weapon in their bows. In fiction, you have, again, characters like Legolas in Lord of the Rings. In the books and the film series, he makes use of long knives, and we have Hawkeye in the Avengers, who transforms his bow into a staff. So yeah, you can't always use the bow, so making the archer capable in other forms of combat would also be a way to make them more well-rounded. Now, with that in mind, there are probably a few things you might want to avoid or keep in the back of your mind. As much as you want to embellish certain skills, there are a lot of things which people might include but don't actually add anything to the archer character. This doesn't mean you shouldn't use them, but they don't necessarily show a skillful archer. One of the obvious ones is the Maw Ninja. That is the character that is so over the top with their acrobatics and their speed shooting and everything that it just looks ridiculous. An example of this might be the 2018 Robin Hood version. And that is literally Lars Anderson shooting in a film context. It looks really nice in slow motion, but to some people it may be just exceptionally over the top, like way too much acting. Another trope is when the actor is obviously using elastic band prop bows or CGI. Hawkeye, again, in the Avengers is a good example of this. Or the jumping and falling shots, the no-look shots. They're obviously not real shots. So that's kind of a sign that where the person is just trying too hard to look good. And while it might be okay for a certain action sequence, doesn't really show skill. Another way to make your character overly complex is to have them know multiple styles of archery. Modern Olympic, modern compound, East Asian horse bows, basically every kind of archery, left, right-handed, thumb draw, Mediterranean, and so on. This is literally actually more skill, because obviously the more things you know, the more skill you have. But in terms of making your archer character work in your piece, it doesn't really make sense to have someone know every style of archery. It's like having a character that knows every martial art. Realistically, you're not going to employ all these skills. You're going to use a small set of skills which are really effective, not multiple skills which you might use once. This is the Occam's razor of archery or in any combat art. You just want to pick the simplest possible choice, not have multiple choices which make things more complex. Realistically, again, an archer is probably going to utilize what they are most familiar with rather than switch styles to be more effective in one situation. For example, if an archer only shoots using the Mediterranean draw on the left side of the bow, as with most Western styles, they wouldn't suddenly switch to a thumb draw and speed shoot in one situation. More likely, they'll use what they know and adapt to it for that situation. So, yeah, you don't need to have someone be a Swiss Army knife to show skill. And the last thing to consider is high draw weights. Being able to use a heavier bow or stronger bow isn't necessarily indicative of skill. It's more a sign of strength. A stronger character can use a stronger bow. It doesn't mean they're a better archer. This is in real life as in fantasy. And often it's easy to amplify draw weight. I mean, you have the comic version of Hawkeye. He used a 250-pound bow. Even in like ancient stories, like in the Odyssey, Odysseus is tested on his ability to string his bow. Only he can shoot the bow, and that proves who he is. It's a nice hallmark of a character, but it doesn't mean they're a good archer. But it can be something you include. And also, if you're using like fictional legendary beings, then you can really boost up their strength. I mean, in fiction, strength is a number, so it doesn't matter if they're shooting a 30-pound bow or 300-pound bow. As long as they hit the target, that's what skill is. Anyway, those are my quick tips on how to make your archer character look more skillful. what do you think? Do you have any other things which you might expect from a skillful archer? And are there certain things you think should be avoided in creating a skillful archer? Post your thoughts below. This is NUSensei. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.